showing up all right? Is the slide showing up all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, today we're talking all about fill your pantry events at food hubs, kind of a hot topic in this group, and a lot of events will be coming up in the next couple of months, mostly in November. So I wanted to just gather a few folks together, share some expertise and learning on these events. Um, I'll give a quick overview if you really don't know what Fill Your Pantry is. I assume most of us are familiar with some kind of bulk buying event. So Fill Your Pantry is just a common name for this type of event. They're usually in the fall, at the end of our produce harvest season here. And for food hubs, they can have a lot of different purposes, but I would say, just to move a lot of product at once, hosting this event to bring in new folks to your market, to your organization, bring in new vendors as well. And then if you're hosting in November, it's a great time to advertise for like holiday buying and also like buying ingredients for your holiday meal. Um, but that's just my summary. We'll hear from some folks that are joining us on the call today. Um, I'm here. I hosted an event, a Fill Your Pantry event with North Coast Food Web in 2020 and 2021. So feels like a while ago. I'll share a little bit about that. But then I'm really excited to have Hannah from Gorge Grown Food Network, Christy, who's usually on the calls with us from Good Groceries, Aaron Thompson from 10 Rivers Food Web, and Faye with Willamette Farm and Food Coalition, and maybe Faye's board member as well, joining us today. So I just have slides with photos from everyone's Fill Your Pantry event, and I'm going to give the speakers like 5 to 10 minutes to just tell us a bit about their event, what it looks like, any interesting details they'd like to share, anything from the photos they want to talk about, and then we'll have a group discussion. So I would encourage folks to put questions in the chat, and we can either get to them as we're going, or we can follow up with any of your questions. Okay, I'll start with me at the North Coast Food Web. So North Coast Food Web is up here in Astoria. It's where I still live. From 2020 and 2021, I really don't have many photos of the event, unfortunately. So I just included one of our promo photos. Um, so we had just started an online farmers market here in Astoria at that time, and actually a local Grange that had hosted a Fill Your Pantry event reached out to the Food Web at the time, and some vendors reached out and asked us to kind of take on the event since they were having to drop it. So we hosted a Fill Your Pantry in 2020 that was just a bigger version of our weekly online market. Um, so we just did online pre-orders and had folks pick it up and tried to do specials for bulk purchasing on pantry items. And then the next one in 2021 was huge compared to that. We had a separate venue from our organization, the kitchen space that we normally worked out of. So we rented a venue, we brought on a lot more vendors, and we did online ordering plus in-person purchasing like market, a big market. And at the time I talked with, I think, Kirsten at 10 Rivers Food Web and Rachel at the time at Willamette Farm and Food Coalition about their Fill Your Pantry events, which were very established and a lot bigger than ours. So yeah, at that time I asked them for advice to try to put that together. But my learnings, that the event in 2021 was incredibly chaotic, and my learnings from that was you should probably start planning in like spring or even winter the year before if you're going to do something, a really big event in November. We definitely were not good about that. I would also say to set your goals, because these events can have a lot of different like main purposes. Like I said earlier, like bringing in new customers, bringing in new vendors. We tried to do everything all at once. Of course, we tried to have the online ordering, the in person. We tried to cater to every single person. and we just didn't have the capacity to run that event very well. So I'm sure that it all went smoothly, like, on the outside, but to me, there was a lot of improvements that you could make. So I would say set your goals about your event, and do less. Like, decide to do less, and start with that. That's what I would have done differently. And then for that event where we did pre-orders and the in-person market, I would limit. We didn't do any limiting of our pre-order products, so all of the products that are on our normal weekly ordering site, so including like fresh and perishable products, were also in that pre-order, and it just trying to pack pre-orders like we do normally, but 4 times as much, and then host an in-person market on the same day, and all of the logistics of people coming to pick up their pre-order and then shop, or just pick up their pre-order. That was, again, just a little bit over our head at that time, and so we should have done less and kind of consolidated what we were doing for pre-order products, if that makes sense. It would have been nice to just do pre-orders for like the bulk and pantry deals that farmers were offering and producers were offering, instead of doing the whole menu of our typical weekly ordering. Yeah, so those are my quick. Oh, yes, Sydney.
So in your case, when you were talking about pre-orders, your hub actually took in the product and managed all of that pre-ordering. Some of the fill your pantries, all of that management sticks with the farmer. So like the fill your pantry collects the information, gives the information to the farmer, and then the pickup is at the farmer's specific stand. But in your case, North Coast Food Web did all of that. Am I understanding correctly what you did?
Yes, and the real story of it is probably so much more complicated than I could even go into, because again, we were trying to cater to everything. So we had some producers who weren't participating in the in-person market that folks could pre-order from, so we were handling their products. And then we had producers that were at the in-person market, so selling their extra stuff, and folks had also pre-ordered from them. So we were packing orders partially and then having people go around and get the rest of their pre-order from vendors. This was also the middle of COVID, so we wanted to have an option for people who didn't want to walk around in person and collect from vendors. So we also would have like people that would go around and get your order if you didn't want to do that, and they could drive up, and I could go on, but yes, I don't recommend that at all. That was way too much for us at the time. I'm sure that someone could pull off an event with all those moving pieces, but for our small organization, that was just, it wasn't worth the extra sales that you would get from that. Catering to everyone in that way, I would simplify it. But yes, does that answer the question? Okay, thanks, Sydney. And Carrie, I see your hand.
Sorry, we can unmute. Yeah, I have so many questions because we were just going to roll out a fill your pantry, and Allison and I at Rogue Valley Food System Network, and we ended up canceling it because all these like we got lost in the details, and then we were in this real crunch to like get the online marketplace authorized for SNAP transactions, and then it got really in the weeds and like whose double up bucks were we going to use, and what was fair to our old producers versus people who were just like jumping in for the fill your pantry without paying fees. It just got really complicated really fast. um so I'll save my most of my questions to the end, but I wanted to ask if our speakers would share what online platform you were using at the time, because that seems to dictate a lot of what you can and can't do.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, and I'm interested in your questions when we get to the discussion as well. So I'll share for our market at the time at the food web. We've always used local food marketplace, so the pre-ordering was on that. And then before I jump to our other speakers, I'll just say that all the Fill Your Pantry events look pretty different. So some folks are not doing pre-orders at all, and that might be something that works for you. So just different organizations that are not necessarily hubs or seen as hubs do Fill Your Pantry events. So it can look really different. And I hope that we get a good wide array of that from our speakers. So the first one I have up is Hannah with Gorge Grown. If you're ready, Hannah.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here with you all today. I want to preface by saying, admittedly, we don't have many great photos from our Fill Your Pantry. They were kind of like all, snapped in the chaos of the last 10 years or so, and we have maybe like 10 photos. So with that, I will share our kind of like a little bit of our history of the Fill Your Pantry and what it looks like now. But I'm Hannah. I work with Gorge Grown Food Network. I am kind of most involved in our farmers market programming. So I'm the director of the Hood River Farmers Market and help run all of our others. So I've been doing that the last 10 years, and that's really where my expertise lies, which is why I was roped into the Fill Your Pantry market. So this will be my second year kind of spearheading the coordination of that market, but have been involved and supported it in many ways since 2015. The market is really a collaboration between the Rockford Grange, which is located in Hood River, and Gorge Grown Food Network. It's held on a Sunday in the beginning of November at the Grange. And the current iteration is a one-day in-person shopping, bulk buying market. But the history, it was really initiated by a few members of the Rockford Grange in 2015, and it was solely organized by the Grangers for the next few years. Gorge Grown really offered just kind of like promotional support and also SNAP processing through our point of sale machine. In 2020, the Grange obviously had to pivot due to COVID, and did an online ordering system through a local food marketplace. And they did a drive-through pickup from individual vendors. So each vendor had a tent set up outside, and folks would drive in and pick up directly from the vendor with their order sheet. In 2021 and 2022, it seems like the Grange was really burnt out with organizing the event and kind of having to adapt to the changes that the pandemic kind of initiated. So there wasn't a market held. Gorge Farmers Collective kind of stepped in and did a fall haul order through their local food marketplace ordering, and we kind of did some like joint promotion with farmers markets to like stock up now and that sort of thing. But for those 2 years, there really wasn't anything formally held in the Fill Your Pantry market realm. And so in 2013, or 2023, sorry, Gorge Grown kind of stepped in to be a more crucial partner in organizing the market. So basically leading the planning and convening Grange members and making sure we're all working together. So since then, we've really kind of continued to take on more and more of the organizing and management of the market. So really the Grange kind of just provides the space with some cost. And they organize kind of these supplemental activities at the market, like food preservation demos, squash tastings, things like that. But Gorge Grown's doing like the vendor management, the SNAP, double up food bucks, promotion, that sort of thing. Kind of the real heavy lifting of the market. When we took on more of this leadership role of the market, we really stressed that it needed to be different than a weekly farmers market, which we have a lot of experience running, but don't want to duplicate our efforts and split our shoppers and our vendors. Hood River Farmers Market operates year-round on Saturdays, so we really kind of wanted to make sure this was a separate, distinctive market. So we really leaned into the bulk buying nature of the market, the storable items that we feature and we advertise. So we really look for that in vendor applications and really lean on that in our promotion of the event too. And we also really wanted to loop in different shoppers than folks who may attend our regular weekly markets. And so, like I kind of said, this market has had a few different formats. So 2015 to 2019, it was a one-day in-person shopping market. In 2020, the Grange pivoted and did that local food marketplace ordering. 2023, when we brought the market back, we also offered the online ordering component in collaboration with Gorge Farmers Collective, I should say. So we offered pre-orders and then in-person shopping. And looking at our data from that year and our historical data, we kind of just felt we had split our gross sales between in-person and online ordering, meaning it didn't add much to the market. People would have just bought that in person. And so we eliminated that in 2024, last year. It was just in person, and it kind of proved our hunch correct. We did essentially the same amount of in-person sales as we had in our gross sales the previous year, combining both online and in person from 2023. So moving forward, we're kind of just looking at a in-person only market, at least for this year. And so that's kind of the market in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have, but you can kind of see from our photos, the market does get a little bit packed in the historical Grange. And it is a little bit wonky to load into. So that photo on the left there's all the crates stacked, and you either have to go up the stairs or wheel it up the ramp. But it all happens inside, which is not super fun in my opinion. So that's one of our struggles. While the Grange is an awesome community space, it is a little bit challenging for a farmer's market. And I think I'll just leave it there, but happy to answer any questions now or at the end.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Carrie, do you want to go ahead?
So if you have your farmers markets on Saturday, did everybody just keep their stuff set up, and then you had another one the very next day that was the bulk buying, or did you have change locations?
It's an entirely different location. Yeah. So actually early on, the Fill Your Pantry market was held on a Saturday in the afternoon. So really what would happen for the first few years is we would have the regular farmers market, folks would frantically tear down and then drive up the hill to set up again, which is a little ridiculous. And so we now have it on a Sunday instead of a Saturday, which is when our weekly market is. So a Sunday, and we feel like that helps set it apart from this normal farmers market too, just having it on a different day. And kind of the different location draws different folks too.
Yeah, Sydney?
Do you have, are you able to see that you have an actually a distinct customer for your Fill Your Pantry events versus your regular farmers market events?
We do surveys. I can't remember the specific questions we ask, but we do ask a question around like how many times do you shop at a weekly farmers market. But most of the time it's the vendors who say like, this was a different crowd than I'm used to at the weekly market, or like, you know, like there's a couple of repeat shoppers from our weekly market, but some new folks. So it's also a little bit anecdotally.
Well, thanks so much, Hannah. Yeah, also excited to get into some discussion. That's very fascinating how the market has changed over the years. It's really interesting. All right. Next up, I have Christy with Good Groceries.
Hi, y'all. Okay, so Good Groceries is planning its official second annual Fill Your Pantry in October. I moved the date back because I live in Malawi County, not on the west side, and so by mid-November, there's really not much available except for storage crops. I didn't want to compete with the farmers market. The farmers market is a co-sponsor. So I wanted it to be after the farmers market ended. last year I put it into November, as you can see from the way people are dressed up, because it's in a greenhouse, but it's not heated. And it was just too late. So anyway, I backed it up to October 25th this year. I did sort of a beta test 2 years ago, and just for a few people. And then last year, this was the first public event. And so I have co-sponsored the farmers market, and last year it was a nursery, Alderslip Nursery. This year it is also the Grange, so another vote for the Grange. They are good at outreach. Alderslip Nursery didn't really help that much with outreach, and the farmers market is basically just putting their logo on it and not really participating much, other than sending out the invitation to people, to their growers. So last year, I did a pre-sale on my Food Hub Good Groceries is an online only platform. And then I do delivery normally weekly. This is to answer Jim's question, once a year generally is when people do fill your pantry, although some people are looking at a spring one sometimes. But generally they're in the fall, it's the end of season kind of thing. Let's see, so I did a pre-sale on my site. The platform is called Graze Cart, Graze. And then there was also in person. So I posted my vendor application, and you can see that farmers have the option of either selling through my site and selling to me wholesale, or to have their own table at the event. Or of course they can do their own pre-sale, but then that's on them, and however they want to do that. And so there's a vendor fee if they have a table at the event, and then of course there's no fee if they're selling through Good Groceries, but then they sell wholesale. The idea, and so with Caitlin's original comment, I do have a separate sub collection of just for fill your pantry, and it's all bulk. So nothing is smaller than a 5-pound bag of anything, mostly bigger. It's cases of things or half cases. And then as you can see, I do have a couple of individual items, but they're larger. So I've got one jar of honey, but it's a quart, and I've got some salt there, but it's a pound and not a little bit of salt. So everything was bulkish. I do the pre-sale in part so that I can get the product. So some of my vendors I access through another food hub, or through or I have stuff shipped. So the stuff on the right there in the canvas bags, that is probably lentils or split peas, and I get those from Palouse Brand, which is in Eastern Washington, and they ship to me. So I need to know so that I'm not investing thousands of dollars in things that don't sell. I try to at least have some idea of what I'm going to sell, and try to sell as much of it ahead of when I have it as possible. So I did pre-sales, pack those orders. I would love to hear from people who do pre-sales, how they store those during the event, when we get into the discussion. I have a refrigerated van, but it doesn't run unless it's running. The refrigerator is not running, but it was cold, as you can see. So anyway, I kept the pre-sales out in the van, and then everything I brought in was available for sale that day. That's how I kind of separated. And so if somebody came in and asked for their pre-sale, then one of us would go out and get it to them. And then that's how they got their food. We had about 80 people attend. So I live in a very small county, and it was the first year, so we were happy with that. 80 people, and I had probably 30 sales day of. And I have a portable snap machine, so I was able to take snap. I don't have a double up food bucks program in place at the moment. And then the pre-sales were obviously already paid. And the other farmers were, I just sent a couple photos. I did have photos of the farmers too, but they, you can see kind of in the background the pumpkins. Oh, I did. Look at me. So those folks live in Imnaha, so they brought up their root crops and squashes, and they're adorable girls. And then there was a lot of garlic. We grow a lot of garlic in Wallowa County, because it's one of the few things that's easy to grow. And then like what one of the vendors was has custom exempt meat, and so they were kind of there to try to get customers as opposed to on-site sales of product. So there's a little bit of everything. And what else can I tell you about it? I'll probably just take questions when everybody's spoken at the end, if everybody has any particular things. Unless, Caitlin, there's anything else you wanted me to hit on my intro?
I thought that was great. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah. All right. If we don't have any immediate questions, next on our list is.
Well, we do, Aaron has one. Do you charge less for
good.
bulk? Yeah, so if you're buying 40 pounds of something, it should be less per pound than if you bought 2 pounds of it.
Good question.
But can I add on to that, Christy? Do you take the discount, or do you ask your producers to discount their price?
I I always let my producers set their price, and then so there it goes two ways. So first of all, they should be discounting for a bulk because they're getting rid of a lot of product at once. And if they don't have that much and they don't want to do that, then they shouldn't do that. But if they're like, yes, I would like to get rid of 50 potatoes at once, then they, it behooves them to discount. But my markup, yeah, it goes both ways. But I'm never pressuring the producers to lower their price. I do put things on sale and then I'm eating that margin myself, but this is kind of a different story.
And Christy, there's a question here from Sydney to hear what you would do differently this year, since you had some challenges last year.
All right. Well, last year went great. The main things that I'm doing differently, well, so the folks who own the nursery aren't available this year. So, and then last year, somebody from the Grange approached me about we do like maybe we could go switch off locations every year, and I was like, probably not. But then these guys weren't available, so I think the Grange is gonna be a good partnership. And then differently, I'm just no, at this point, it's going to be pretty much the same thing in a different spot. I'm adding more products and definitely gonna get more help day of. I guess that would be a thing. Was that if I hadn't had that other person, I would have lost my mind. So I was grateful to have one helper, but I think 2 or 3 might be even better, especially because I'm kind of running the event in addition to my table. Yeah, and so one thing I should add is because I have a food hub and I'm not a producer, one of the things that I did for the day of was one of the reasons I do that application that I put the link in the chat for is to get an idea of what people are going to bring so that I'm not also bringing that. There's no point in me competing with them, especially when half the time they're my vendors anyway. So I'm looking for things that nobody else is producing, which in Wallowa County is very easy to do. Just not garlic.
Well, Thanks, Christy. All right. I'm gonna move over to Erin with 10 Rivers. If you're ready, Erin.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Erin with 10 Rivers Food Web. I've been helping with our Fill Your Pantry since 2002, so not a super long time. And I'm a volunteer, and we have just new this year, there's a couple paid employees with 10 Rivers Food Web that are helping us, but it's always pretty much been volunteer run. And our first Fill Your Pantry was 2008. 10 Rivers is Benton, Lynn, and Lincoln counties. So Corvallis is where we host our event at the Benton County Fairgrounds. So just based on some of the points that other folks have mentioned, I guess we can go through the pictures first just to give you an idea. So we are at the Benton County Fairgrounds. Some of these pictures are from an alternate site that happened just one year during COVID, that was all outdoors. So you can see everybody's masks on. But around the fairgrounds, we have these sandwich boards kind of directing people. This is some of the volunteers. If you can go to the next page. So we do have pre-orders and then also sales the day of. There are some vendors that only sell the day of. They don't do pre-orders. If you have pre-orders, we have everybody check in at this table, and you basically pick up your sheet that shows your orders and what farmers you have to go to. We give them a map showing them where their vendors are located so that it makes it a little bit easier. At the fairground site that we use, it is the same site where the winter farmers market happens, so a lot of our people are familiar with it, but there's a covered outdoor area where some of the vendors are, and then there's also a building where several of our vendors are, completely inside. And so there's a picture of part of the inside with some of the tables getting set up before the event. And then just a picture of one of the vendors' tables. You can go to the next slide, please. Just an example of some of the different things that are offered. And the one picture with samples of food, that's our Sagra event, which is something that's been, this will be the third year of the Sagra. And so we've had several local chefs who are preparing dishes using winter vegetables to promote the winter vegetables, and they are cooking them on site and have samples available for people. It was kind of a rough start, and we're still working out some details and partnering up the Sagra with the Fill Your Pantry event, but hoping that it benefits everybody. But the main point is really just to promote the winter vegetables and show people what they can do with those vegetables. And you can go to the next slide, please. I don't know if there are any more.
That was the last one we had for you.
Okay. So let's see. Mentioned we do offer curbside pickup if people don't want to go around through the event, because so we have several wagons. We just have everybody bring wagons, and we can offer to go around and pick up your order for you. You can also use the wagon or the wheelbarrow while you're going around to get your orders and then load your car and bring it back. We have several volunteers the day of to man the tables, to provide vendor relief if they need to run to the bathroom or get coffee. Vendors for setup, volunteers for setup and cleanup. So we've got a lot of volunteer staff to manage the day of. Let's see. We also try to have coffee and tea and snacks for the vendors and the volunteers. Trying to get stuff donated, but other times we just purchase, some baked goods from one of the vendors for the volunteers. And they are different vendors than our regular farmers market. So our regular farmers market is from April to November on Saturdays. And this is on a Sunday, early November, in a different location and often different vendors. We do meet, so our volunteer group, we meet regularly through the year, and we've had the same core group for the last, say, 3-4 years of planning this event. And so that really helps because everybody kind of has their duties that they know how to do now. And we have an Excel timeline with kind of all the tasks on there and when they need to be done and assigned to who. And so that helps everybody kind of just check in and see what's been done, what still needs to be done. And we meet regularly, mostly on Zoom, to just kind of keep track and make decisions on those sorts of things. I'm just checking my notes for a couple other things. I think advertising has always been one of the challenges, just trying to figure out how to get the word out to more people. So, we have some social media, but because we're all volunteer based, it's tricky to, I think, get enough because none of us are doing this as our full-time job. We hang up posters. We give the vendors little tiny quarter sheets that they can hand out to their customers to try to, say at the market or if they're ordering things to encourage their customers to come. In Corvallis, we have a spot downtown where there's a giant banner that covers Harrison as you drive into Corvallis. And so a couple years ago, we spent the money to buy a banner that advertises our event, and that gets hung up. It's the city organizes it. So we have to apply and get chosen, and we pay a fee every year, but it's this huge banner that everyone coming into Corvallis is going to see. And that just gets updated with the date, but it has, fill your pantry, shop day of or pre-order, and it has the dates on it and the website so they can quickly get some information as they're driving by. But we don't really do a whole lot of other paid advertising because we just don't have a big budget for that. But I think that's always one of the challenges is trying to figure out how to reach more people. Newspapers are not really an option because they just don't exist anymore. We do have Snap. Sometimes we have some other folks tabling, like the master preservers. And the only thing with our date, it's always early November, but the fairgrounds get taken over when there's a football game for Oregon State. And so we always have to plan our event around whenever the home football games are. And we just reserve the fairgrounds and also pay the fee for that location. But there's a nonprofit discount to rent the fairgrounds. I think that's about it, unless anybody has any specific questions, or I can wait till the end for that.
Erin, I must have missed it, but what software is your online pre-order?
Oh, I don't do a lot with that, so I'm not most familiar with that end of things, but they use multi-vendor marketplace. And so I think what they do is they just basically sign up for like 2 months for the time they need and then cancel their subscription every year. I know it's a pain. And the vendors are loading photos of their products and the prices and things like that. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes to get the website up for pre-orders. And in terms of pre-orders and getting those ready for folks the day of, that's all on the vendors as well. We're not like purchasing product to sell or anything like that.
And that photo, maybe I can go back to it, with the pre-orders. So folks are arriving, and if they have a pre-order, they basically get a map and some help.
They get a map of where the vendors are, and they get the sheet that shows everything that they pre-ordered, and who, what it was and who to pick it from. And so when they find their vendor that they ordered from, they give them the sheet, and then whatever the order number is, I think that's how the vendor identifies who's it for, is an order number. And then they also can just shop the day of as well. And I don't think there's not any restrictions on the size of what you can order. Say you're not only ordering bulk things. I mean, you could order one little jar of honey if you wanted to pre-order that.
Gotcha. And then we had a question if you charge for curbside pickup. Maybe I missed that.
No, there's no charge for it. Not that many people do it. I think during COVID we had a handful of people, but I don't think anyone's really taken advantage of it the last couple of years. You know, maybe somebody just with some physical limitations on getting around the event.
Great. Anything else pressing that folks wanted to ask Erin before we move on?
I just wanted to, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. To share about your Fill Your Pantry Day, if there's a vendor form or if it's already set and you're good for this season.
There is a vendor application. We have a lot of the same people coming back all the time. But there is a vendor application, and we try, you know, there's some kind of loose guidelines of where you're located. You're supposed to be in Benton, Lincoln, or Lynn counties. And we try not to saturate it with, say, a bunch of meat vendors or, you know, a bunch of honey vendors, things like that. Try to kind of have a nice distribution. But folks just apply and then try to spread the word, I guess, through their other farmer contacts. But that's one other thing too, is just trying to find new vendors is, I would say, another challenge.
I'm looking on the website, but I can't find the link to share.
For the application? Or
yes.
That's a good question. Let me see if I can
see the
find.
list. I see the list of who already is a vendor. But someone I just reached out to said they weren't involved, and I was like, well, just wanted to share them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're not taking people for this year's event.
Gotcha.
Any longer. But I can definitely try to find it out for the future.
If not, I'll just share your website.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
For next year, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Carrie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, for people who haven't pre-ordered and they just come to your event and they want to purchase, do you facilitate like the SNAP, or do you provide SNAP, or is that each vendor's responsibility to have their own equipment and matching funds?
No, there is SNAP, and we have our woman who does the farmers market. SNAP comes to the event and handles all that. So they do have to check in with her and get that set up before they go to the vendors. But the vendors are handling all those day of, you know, purchases and things like that.
And then do they just cash in tokens? Do you use like your fake currency money, or how did the vendors get paid for their SNAP?
I think she is using tokens for the SNAP the day of, yeah.
All right, looks like questions are quieting down for that. Thank you so much, Erin. If you have time to hang around till the discussion, I'm sure that will be helpful.
Okay.
Our last speaker today, I'm hoping that Faye or Sonia are here with Willamette Farm and Food Coalition. I know there was a phone number on there. I wasn't sure who that was.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Faye is on. Maybe you can see if, okay, great. I'll let Faye take it along. But if you need me to jump in at any point, feel free to call on me.
For sure. Do you want to introduce yourself really fast?
Sure. My name is Sonia, and I am helping out Willamette Farm and Food Coalition sort of from the market side. And so this year It's more of a collaborative effort between a couple of organizations. So historically, Willamette Farm and Food Coalition has sort of run the whole show. And this year, they're having the Lane County Farmers Market run sort of like the day of event and handle the SNAP processing and things like that. And then we are also partnering with Lane County Bounty, and they are like an online food hub and like distribution. And so they are handling all of the pre-sales this year.
Yeah, so Sonia works with the Lane County Farmers Market, and my name's Faye. I work over at WFFC, and I have been with WFFC for a little over 2 years. However, the first 2 years I was just kind of observing the event. And then this year I'm actively on the planning committee. So our event has been taking place for quite some time now. Um, and a lot of the history is kind of similar to what you guys were sharing. A lot of the strengths that we have had in our event is the wide reach that it has had. And it has brought in substantial vendor sales to our farmers at the end of the season, right before the holidays. And as a nonprofit, we have more than one program under our umbrella. So Fill Your Pantry is just one of a few programs, and we are able through some of our other programs to have incentives like food vouchers, and we've also partnered with like Double Up Food Bucks to offer things like that to increase access. Um, but we've also historically, from what I've observed, had a lot of um, feedback similar to what you guys have all been sharing. There's been a lot of challenges. One of the biggest challenges we faced is vendor feedback from farmers. And that's because historically WFFC has used the event as a fundraiser. And last year in particular, they raised their fees. So at that time, vendors were paying a percentage of their pre-orders because we do pre-orders and day of sales. So they were giving us a percentage of their pre-orders. They were paying a vendor fee to participate the day of. And then on top of that, they were giving us a percentage of their sales. And then if we wanted to have prepared food, um, the event space itself had an additional fee on top of that. So our event takes place at the Lane County Agricultural Pavilion at the fairgrounds. And just like you were talking about at 10, I think at 10 Rivers, we have like a very large covered outdoor venue that we use. Um, so one of the biggest feedback that we received is just this didn't feel like an event truly for the farmers. It felt like a fundraiser. Um, we did accept SNAP, but because of how our nonprofit is like legally uh, put together, we were having to collaborate with like 3 or 4 different organizations to piece together all the parts we needed to make the event happen smoothly. So you couldn't use Snap online. We had to go through this like convoluted process of like holding someone's order, and then the day of they would have to come in and wait in this really long line to actually run their Snap card. So there'd just be this like really, really long line for our SNAP recipients. And the whole process was just kind of confusing. The customers have historically kind of struggled in navigating the event because of long lines and like I think lack of very clear signage. And at this point, um, I can share with you guys the impacts from last year, but it's a really big event. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a lot of people who attend it. So having like a good experience, I think, is really important. Being able to know where things are. I know historically they did pass out a map, But I think that like actual large in-person signs were lacking about where should I go for SNAP and things like that. We also, like some of you have said, historically have incorporated like value-added activities, like demonstrations and cooking demos. Last year there was apple cider pressing and like a band, but I would say they were really under-marketed. Um, so they weren't, the community didn't really participate in them as much. But I think part of that was just because, as you guys have all shared, these events have a lot of working parts. So at the time, I'm not so sure we had all the proper support that we needed. Um, because there were so many community partners involved, the reconciliation was very complicated, and it would each year, those first 2 years I was on the board, um, um, they went into like almost the beginning of spring where we were still kind of reconciling the event, which ours also happens always at the beginning of November. Um, and then we also, like you guys had mentioned, were understaffed and didn't have enough volunteers for the day of. So with all those things taken into consideration, we made a lot of changes this year. So because of all you guys, you all really like nailed a lot of the same, I think, like uh complications that arise when you're trying to do like pre-ordering and day of sales. So the way that myself and our current board kind of looked at it is how can we, with our current budget and our current bandwidth, because we're right now just completely volunteer run, how can we make this event happen and happen smoothly? And we kind of put together a list of what our strengths and weaknesses are, and then tried to fill in other organizations that could fill the weaknesses that we have, and that are their strengths. So one of those weaknesses was we had historically been using local food marketplace for our pre-ordering, and it can be really complicated. There's like a lot to the website, and they offer a lot of education around it. But it helps just to work with an organization who already knows it inside and out. So we collaborated with Lane County Bounty, which is a local business in the Eugene Springfield area, and they like almost exclusively work with that particular website. And they also have a system built in to accept SNAP directly online, and they offer delivery. So through that collaboration, we're able to hand off that to them, and they're completely managing it for us, including the communications with the vendors and getting all that stuff up and ready. And then because of it, we are able to have our SNAP recipients use SNAP directly online. They no longer will have to wait in a long line the day of to have their card swiped. So that was a really big benefit to the relationship as well. And then for accessibility reasons, we wanted to start offering delivery. So this year it's really more like a testing situation. So we're only offering it within the Eugene and Springfield area, but we're hoping in the future that we'll be able to offer free delivery to people who can't access the event and financially can't access the delivery charges. So that's really exciting. We've also changed the event itself, and it no longer is a fundraiser. So for vendors, they're only having to pay a flat 5% fee for pre-orders, along with a 3% card processing fee. And then for the day of, they only have to pay a flat rate vendor fee. They're no longer having to pay a percentage of their sales the day of. And for ready to eat food and drink, where I was telling you earlier, there was an even additional charge through a grant. We're able to cover that additional charge so that it's truly accessible for our farmers and our ranchers and our food producers to participate in this. Um, we're able to fund and cover the event costs through a grant from the Upper Willamette Soil and Water Conservation District. That's paying for staffing and for some of the marketing. And then the additional grant that's covering the event is the ODA Specialty Crop Block Grant. And then the vendor fees will cover any additional event costs. Now, in regards to SNAP, we've had some challenges, and this year something new is we are offering SNAP match through our own programs. So we're not offering double up food bucks this year. We have incentive funds through a grant we have via Trillium. And with that money, there is no limitations to what the customers can purchase. Anything that's SNAP eligible, our customers will be able to use this SNAP match for, and they can get a match of up to $150. So if they spend $150, they get $150 to spend. And then what else did I want to share? So the day of event is being completely managed by the farmers market, and I'd love for Sonia to chime in and talk a little bit about what that looks like and how that's changing. And just to share kind of how WFFC, like what role we've taken in this is the budget, we're like funding it, we're basically contracting Lane County Bounty and Lane County Farmers Market. And we are spearheading the marketing, the communications, the volunteer recruitment, and then we're organizing a really big fall fundraiser in place of raising funds through the event itself. So yeah. Sonia, do you want to talk a little bit about what the day of the event looks like?
Sure. I'm not sure how long this meeting is supposed to go, and so if I'm going over at any point, someone please let me know and cut me off.
Okay.
But I think one of the strengths of bringing on farmers market staff is, this is something that we do every single week, and there are going to be some like differences. This is like in a different location than our normal market operations, but we have cashiers that are, very familiar with running, the snap cards and, all of our like, EBT and debit credit transactions. And we also are really familiar with like the post-event reconciliation process. And so we are hoping that that's going to go a lot more smoothly this year. And I think also because the funding streams are a little bit more concentrated, that's also going to be easier to manage. I think something that Faye had mentioned was that the SNAP match this year is coming from WFFC and the grants that they are a part of. And so one thing that is going to be different from our normal market operations is usually we use tokens for SNAP, and then we also have the cards for double up food bucks. And so we're going a slightly different route this year and are essentially going to be having like carbon copy slips. And that way we have a record and our farmers have records of this, what goods are being purchased with matching funds, and they can get reimbursed for those after the event is over without having to like buy a whole new set of market tokens that are only going to be used once a year. And the reason why we're doing that shift is because if we use our normal market tokens, that's pulling from like a different pool of funding, and we're trying really hard to keep our delineations of funding separate. Other than that, for day of planning, the market staff, we're handling, we're getting the map set up and, getting folks who need power and water hooked up in the right locations, setting up day of activities like the music and cider pressing. And we have like a sensory zone this year, which I think is going to be really exciting. Um, and actually like managing and training our volunteers, so that I think that's another difference. I haven't run Fill Your Pantry in the past, and so I'm not sure how much volunteer training was done before the event, but this year we are planning to train our volunteers prior so that folks know how things are going to run, and everyone sort of is like a little more clear in how to engage with our customers. We have a really huge event, and so trying to make sure that our staff and volunteers are as educated as possible, I think, is going to really help this year. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so share with the carbon copy ticket. Yeah, so essentially anyone who is going to be shopping with SNAP day of is going to be handed like essentially just like a shopping sheet. And they're going to go around and kind of fill out on their sheet, like, oh, I want, 20 pounds of potatoes from this vendor, and I want 8 pounds of onions from this vendor. And then they bring that up to the info booth. We essentially just like write them the receipt, and we the staff members at the info booth keep one of those carbon copies, and the customer gets the other copy. And then they essentially, that's their receipt to say, hey, farmer, I paid it, here's my receipt. And then they get their goods from that. And that way also there's a little bit of extra accountability so that if there are any discrepancies, at the day of event, or at the end of the process during reconciliation, there's duplicate records. And we're also talking about keeping a digital copy, running spreadsheet day of, and that way we just have like an extra triple check, because when you're dealing with little slips of paper, things can fall through the cracks. Carrie, it looks like your hand is up.
Sorry, I don't mean to monopolize this space, but the Farm Collective was in a very similar position as Lane County Bounty was when we were approached by Rogue Valley Food System Network to hold this Southern Oregon Fill Your Pantry event. And I just couldn't figure out how, first of all, we went as far as to find out using local food marketplace to avoid disrupting our existing subscriptions and weekly orders. The requirement through local food marketplace is to duplicate our website, which meant another whole subscription, a monthly rate. And they charge like an active monthly rate for when you're using LFM. And then all the other months you have to pay a hiatus rate, which is $59 a month. So we would have to have two marketplaces to manage, which is exactly what Lane County Bounty is doing. And so I couldn't figure out how they were making any money if they were only charging that 8% that you mentioned. But it sounds like if you contracted with Lane County Bounty and then you have grant funding to cover that cost. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that how it happened?
Yeah, you are. And I think that because LCB, the Lane County Bounty, has their own active marketplace, there was some like nuance to it. So even though it's like a collaborative event, they had to have their branding on the website, because it's essentially like under their like licensing sort of thing. And so there wasn't a way to, like, for example, have WFFC's branding on the top of the page, even though they're the ones fiscally financing the event, because of exactly what you're talking about. And I think even in that same vein, local food marketplace also was able to give Lane County Bounty like a discount for adding that separate, they're like, oh, you're a great customer, you already work with us, this and that. But otherwise, yeah, it would have been a really expensive process for just like, a once a year kind of event.
Exactly. That's actually why we canceled our event. That and the fact that because the LFM offered a 15% discount for duplicating and creating us a second site. That means you're also managing two sets of inventory, and you have to also onboard all of the new producers that want to join who aren't your regularly attending producers. So
Yes.
it's a lot to manage. And so what you shared today is really helpful to understand that there needs to be a sponsor to like underwrite some of those expenses to really make it a beneficial to the vendors, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
absolutely.
if we had to charge a booth fee plus our normal like 35% markup, I mean, it wouldn't even cover our time or expenses to have the event.
Hmm.
Yeah, we didn't. I'd have like I'd have to look at exactly how you're set up a little bit more, because fortunately for WFFC, we didn't really have to do much of anything except for legally create a contract between Lane County Bounty and ourselves and local food marketplace. Um,
Yeah, it's not even, I mean, I can see where the branding would come into it, but it has more to do with the SNAP requirements. There's
yeah,
so many requirements about I won't even get into it, but it has taken a year and a half of us, a year and a half to get authorized on the online SNAP pilot project. And we're finally in the final testing phase.
yeah.
And it was
That's
just,
why we contracted with Lane County Bounty, because we knew they already had the experience with all that. And
yeah.
luckily, because of that, it's been really smooth for us.
One of the last things that I do want to chime in and just make you aware of is, and I don't think this is LFM's rule. I think this is like a federal rule because it's coming from SNAP, which is a federal program. But anything that you pay with SNAP, you need to have physically within like a certain window. I think it's like 2 weeks. And so since we're allowing pre-orders with SNAP, um, we're kind of doing this like interesting little workaround where essentially whatever people are shopping for pre-order with SNAP is being held like on retainer. And then no sooner than 2 weeks before the event, they have to log back in to finally pay for it with their SNAP card to make sure that like that order is finalized. And that was something that we did not anticipate this year. And so I just wanted to let everyone know here that that is an issue that we
Yeah.
troubleshooted, just so that you know if you're using the same software.
Yeah, I forgot about that, but I'd say that's the one kind of convoluted piece that we've run into is having to do that.
Well, thank you so much, Faye and Sonia, for sharing, and all the speakers that were able to join today. Like, what a wealth of knowledge. And there's so many people in this group that also have tons of knowledge as well. We are meeting till 2:30, so we have about 20 minutes left. If any of the speakers need to go, of course, feel free. But if you're able to stick around, we'll do some more questions and discussion. Sydney's got a question.
I had dropped this one in the chat earlier, but I'm interested from all of the speakers, what drove the decision to host a Fill Your Pantry event? Is this a request that's coming from your farmers, or is it a request that's coming from your customers or community, or some other reason?
I don't mind sharing from my perspective, if no one else is ready to jump in. I actually, this is my first year getting involved with Fill Your Pantry as an organizer, and I worked on small farms prior to this. And I know for a lot of small farms, events like this really are a lifeline to move out bulk storage crops at the end of the year, so things aren't just sitting in their coolers. A lot of farms shut down for a few months out of the year, and so trying to financially bridge the gap until spring crops coming in is a huge one. A lot of those small farms also have CSAs and other programs like that. But when you're dealing with perishable items, you know, things that you can't just stick in a freezer, having events like this, I know are huge for financial solvency.
Living out in rural Eastern Oregon, a lot of people are used to buying in bulk. A lot of people use Azure Farm as a food source. And so this fits right in with that sort of stock up for winter kind of thing.
Although I can't really speak on exactly why WFFC began Fill Your Pantry, I can say, aside from what Sonia shared, our other, I think, most like our biggest purpose for the event is having these local nutritious foods available to the community, so that they can eat them, like you were saying, in rural areas all throughout the winter. And then one of the pieces we're continuing to work on is the education piece on spending a little bit more upfront in bulk, but saving in the long run. And then how do you prep all of those things properly?
I don't think I have anything new. I think the biggest, again, I can't speak to why they started Fill Your Pantry back in 2008 here in Corvallis. But they want to support the local producers and provide that food for the community. And as it's called, 10 Rivers Food Web, you know, strengthening the food web here in these 3 counties that they support.
I just want to highlight in the chat, Delaney's asking about pre-orders, and I think we've seen from a lot of different folks today the complications with pre-orders and asking if it's worth it. And I want to highlight Hannah with Gorge Ground's experience, at least in their instance, that their sales seem to do just fine with just the in-person event. So it can really depend, it seems. And if anybody else wants to speak to that, feel free to go ahead.
For me, it was, yeah, and granted, I haven't done this as long as some people, but so I really just have last year to look at. But it was way more sales, pre-sales, and bigger, yeah, just bigger orders. You know, 25 pounds of this and 25 pounds of that. And yeah, so I think figuring out the platform issue, and you know, it's very difficult to switch platforms, but I think local food marketplace isn't the best option for that kind of thing, but definitely worth it in my opinion.
Yeah, I was surprised by Hannah's the pre-sales. Eliminating pre-sales did not impact sales. That honestly surprised me quite a bit. I know at our Central Oregon one, pre-sales are huge. I think the vast majority of sales are pre-sales.
Yeah, we didn't really dig in to why, but we also have a really thriving online marketplace already here in the Gorge, with Gorge Farmers Collective. And so you can order really bulk quantities through them too. So that might be a reason where it's just like it's more of it caters to the folks who are going to want to shop in person versus the people who are going to want to order online and that sort of thing. So kind of just reaching different customers perhaps, but that's just a hunch. That's not data driven.
Yeah, that makes sense. Different areas have different access to different things. And in my area, there's just not that much competition. There's not that much going on. To Carrie's thing about getting overwhelmed with what was going on in Sydney, definitely do something small well before you try to do something bigger. You know, the events that have music and have sensory, whatever that was, you know, they've had years to build up and be able to add stuff. And definitely I recommend, like, even with the Grange, because it's the first year at the Grange, and so I went to the Grange meeting in September, and I had already talked with one person there, but so we were presenting the idea to the other people, and it was just like popcorn, like, oh, we could do this, and let's add this, and let's add this. And I was like, please, no, let's not add any of those things this year. Let's write all those things down and think about them for next year. But let's just do, yeah. So small and good, in my opinion, is better than big and not good.
Thanks, Christy. I was definitely thinking that when I was putting together my learnings as well. I also want to highlight that, like, some folks putting on Fill Your Pantry are already doing online ordering every week. That was the case at the Food Web and like with Christy. And so doing a really big event one week and then going right back to your every single week pre-order stuff, that is a lot to like keep the train running and then do a giant thing and then keep the train running again. The momentum of that is really tough. So I think those events could look different than a group that is coming in and doing this event once a year and just putting all of that energy into a once a year event. Obviously we have a lot of different models going on, but yeah, that's another takeaway I'm getting from this conversation, is that those two things could look very different and definitely start small. I agree, Christy.
Did anybody have, did any of their vendors have a real learning curve in terms of managing in this new market format? Was that a struggle for anyone? I'm just curious.
I think not for mine, because they had all done farmers market stuff. So this was essentially another farmers market, maybe with bigger bags.
I will
But
say that we are.
navigating the, oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. I was just gonna say that we are planning to do a vendor training before the event, like an online orientation. And we have like two potential days set up. So like if they're not able to make one, they can make the other, just because we are switching how we're running Snap this year and just making sure that everyone is on the same page with that.
Any other big questions folks have before we kind of wrap up? I put some topics on this last slide, but I think we've covered all of them already pretty much and more.
Do people do booth fees? Well, I think everyone does booth fees. What is oh, some of you do a percentage. I do a flat fee. So then the percentage, I assume, is just a honor system. How does that work?
I think we changed ours up this year a little bit. And again, this is not really my area, so I don't know all the details, but the pre-orders are a percentage of the pre-orders. And so since that's all going through the marketplace, you can keep track of what that is. And then a vendor fee for the day of. And then I believe that in the past, they also took a percentage of sales the day of. But I don't know what that percentage was. And so at the end of the event, the vendors are all frantically, totaling things up and then figuring out what they need to pay. So yeah, that would be more on the honor system. for that day of sales.
So the percentage that is charged to the customer through the online marketplace, and this question is to several of you, is that retained by the organization running the marketplace, or is it passed on to the contracted party? Does that make sense? So like for Willamette, if you're contracting Lane County Bounty to run all the pre-order sales and they're charging 8%, do they keep that 8% to, or do they give it back to you?
I think it will depend on after we like fully reconcile everything. But our relationship with Lane County Bounty is we're paying them hourly to do the work that they're doing. So after we reconcile, like once they're paid and the vendors are paid, whatever is left over will go back into the event itself for the following year. Because again, we're like, it's an active decision we've made that this is no longer a fundraiser. We're trying to pay to get the event done through grants and fundraising and different means.
Yeah, because I know to onboard a new producer and all their inventory is about 2 hours per vendor.
Yeah, I think there's certain pieces that Lane County Bounty is responsible for, but a bulk of the work the vendors themselves are doing.
Some are better than others.
I mean, that's just true with anyone with technology, you know? And I wouldn't always say that that system is totally intuitive. I've played around on there even though I'm not managing it this year.
Yeah, that is a topic that has transcended many conversations about the online ordering systems. Is you can some folks there's a lot of hand holding that has to happen, and then other folks you can just send them the login and they'll figure it out. And I don't know that we've figured out the best way to move forward. I think it's just a combination of those things.
I do
Didn't you do
think
a
that if
video on
you,
that?
oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, I do think that if you share with them, like with local, oh my gosh, local food marketplace directly, I think that they can work with you to get you, you know, the education that accommodates your needs. Because for me, most websites are pretty intuitive and I can do what you were saying, Caitlin, kind of like figure it out on my own. When I go into that system, it doesn't feel that way for me. So I would be emailing them like, these are some accommodations I need as a human so that I can use your system. Yeah, that's what I would suggest doing. Because it
Yeah,
does seem to be like the system right now that does kind of work best for this event. You know, sometimes beggars can't be choosers if there isn't something perfect out there quite yet.
They're I'm gonna pop in there just because I'm 2 months into launching ours, and they're very accommodating to feedback, and they also know all the workarounds because they have lots of people that are using it and they can't get the workarounds until the next release comes in, right? So they're like, it's in the next release. They just did that. And so like they're adjusting so much. Like they just did a massive survey right before they did this last release, and whoever filled it out got their, did what they can. But they're also just trying to, there's some solutions that it's not just them waiting. It's like there's just not a solution to program it the way they would like to program it too. So there's also that too. So we're really pleased with local food marketplace. I mean, it makes my job so much easier. I can't imagine having to have people manage their own thing, and there's no charge to the farmer. That's what I love. So yes, I'm paying for a group of 20 farmers, but yeah, this is not this today's topic, but but it was neat to hear that Lane County Bounty's doing that, and it's kudos to you guys in Willamette to like going to the people who do the events well or do that particular well and creating a coalition. Like that's was so great to hear. So it makes a lot of sense to do it. So we'll see what Ten Rivers does this year because now they have both. They have the one that they've been using over the years, but they also have local food marketplace and they're doing both. So I'm curious. I think Mark's deciding that he might just stick with the old one, but I'm curious what he's going to do.
Yeah, just to share with you guys, one of the things that's really inspired me recently, I've been working at Friends of Zinger Farm for the last year and a half, and they have a CSA Partnerships for Health program where it's like a prescription CSA box. And for accessibility reasons, they will hand deliver these boxes, but they were using DoorDash as their collaborator. And I don't know why, it just like really bothered me. And I kept having lots of conversations with them about it because as a nonprofit, when we get funds, we have a lot of power in how we redistribute those funds. And so the idea of using a delivery system for the CSA to go directly to their door, I thought was beautiful. But now you have this money that you can redistribute. Why would you choose DoorDash as the person you're going to give it to? And luckily, we have Lane County Bounty in our area so that we're able to redistribute that money to them. And it's being recirculated back into our local economy. And on top of that, their values aligned with us and the other things that they're offering in their business, because it is a business that they're running. And I think there's a lot of other local delivery uh, businesses out there than there used to be. So I would definitely look into that. But I'm also just trying to get them to expand so that they're able to offer these kinds of services to other businesses and organizations who have constituents who need those accommodations. And we're finding that people do more and more. They need accommodations with being able to access um, rides. And if you're living out in rural areas, how would you ever be able to come to this event?
I love that, Faye. Thanks for touching on that. I think for me, that also goes back to defining your purpose and goals of your event in the first place and figuring out those things. Because if you'd like to focus on accessibility, that's a lot of work, but like it's really good work. And I'm glad that you all built that up over many, many years. That's an awesome example for anybody else trying to start a Fill Your Pantry. So thank you. I think we're gonna wrap up soon. I don't know if Sydney has anything else to add, but I would just push that if you have additional questions, especially about Fill Your Pantry, send them out to the listserv and we can all chat on email about it. And then we can dig up we've definitely had calls before about the online software for ordering that we can dig up if folks are thinking a lot about local food marketplace and other ordering platforms. Like Sydney said, we've had whole conversations about Snap, probably, I don't know, at least several times now. So we can dig those up for extra resources and continue talking about it on the listserv. Anything else, Sydney?
No, thank you, Caitlin, for putting this together, and thanks to all the guest speakers for coming. Hugely helpful. I know Gary had like 5 pages of notes, I think is what she said. I know Delaney was taking a bunch of notes. So I really appreciate you all sharing your experiences and helping us not trip over some of the things you've already learned. Until next time, see ya.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks to the speakers for
everyone.
joining.
Sydney, the Luna Bar.
Hi, Willie. Bye, Willie.